Hello. Let me just make sure everything is going. Hello. Let's unmute this so I can. Yeah, that sounds like working audio. How about Twitch? Hello. Hello, Twitch. Are we here? Yeah. Okay. What about YouTube? YouTube looks like it's working. Um. Excuse me. Yeah, it all looks like it's working. I muted myself for look, hang on. Is there a huge echo? Or is that just how I've got no? I put the mute on. No. Everything's working fine. Um hmm. Yes, I think that one. There we go. Hello. We can start. Hello, hello, hello. I said I was going to stream on the weekend. And then I didn't. I said I was going to look at fixing the dice roller. So I had a bug where if I type, I don't know, hello, and then world, if I can not fat finger that, and roll that, then ooh, it's broken. Why didn't that work? Closing WebSocket client. New WebSocket user. Okay. Hello. Okay, so there is a bug where it's still closing the WebSockets. That's interesting. Okay, here we go. It works. The bug, I did actually look at it in the end. So what I had found is that if I turned this off, please enter a number. Ooh, that works. It wouldn't work. What it was doing, it was not actually checking in the JavaScript that this was done. It was, I can't remember now. I'd have to look at the fucking code again. Hang on. In here. Oh, look, that's not readable. That's interesting. I swear I had. Where is it in Firefox? Um, storage? No. Debugger. Oh, it's just called debugger, which is actually better than in Chrome. Oh my god. Yeah, look at this. I can read this code now. Um, it was description is null. Here we go. I was setting the flag wrong. That's what it was. So this bit of lovely code here, which everyone's probably going, Jesus Christ, what the hell have you done there? If you know JavaScript. Oh, hang on. Let me make it so I can actually read the chat. I jump over to here. There we go. There's Twitch chat. Pop out chat here. There we go. Now I can actually read the chat. Yeah, what's this horrible ternary statement? Well, I haven't written it in JavaScript. I've written it in paren script, and so it's not. That's just what paren script turns into. Um, it is an if statement, I think. With a few and conditions, but basically this was only checking is spec name, which is the checkbox, the ID of the checkbox, is it empty or is it null? I wasn't actually checking if it was true. So I was always setting the flag for the speciality to true. I was always setting it to 4. So that was obviously wrong. So that fixed it, and that fixed the problem. However, apparently I'm interrupted while the page was loading. Hang on, the page loaded and everything worked fine, right? No, it's all working now. No, hang on, now it's not working again. So I do have another bug where that's killing the thing. However, I can just roll this. So I need to work out what my WebSocket connection bug is. However, the actual dice roller works. And I did that. I did all of that off stream while I was recompiling. Well, I'm updating my system. I'm running Gen 2 again, which means that I have to compile everything, which is generally not an issue. It only becomes an issue when glibc needs to be recompiled because there's a new version of glibc. Because everything depends on libc, so that'll mean that a million things need to be recompiled after it. But if it just wants to recompile it, that one takes hours. This is specifically on my old PC, which I'm using to actually do the encode and stream. So that then took forever, and the reason I did an update, instead of streaming, I was going to stream and then do the update, was I couldn't get Jack to work. Apparently, I think I finally worked it out because I'm now streaming again. If I pull the cable out, if I pull the USB cable out, while Jack is running, it locks it, and you can't run Jack on that device again. Except you can run Jack on the device. You just can't connect to Jack that is running on the device. So very strange. And it took me, well, until now. So what is it? It's Wednesday. And I discovered this problem on Saturday. Yep. I spent all weekend looking at that. And then a bunch of time yesterday and on Monday and Tuesday. Anyway, we're here now. I finally figured it out this morning, and I've not got too long. But we can look a little bit at this, and you can see that I've progressed the character sheet a little bit too. I've actually got a style, the beginnings of a style. I had thought that I'd gotten that to be on 3. What's it called? Instead of in 3 columns instead of 2. Hmm. Can I make? Oh, I can. Except this isn't probably good for stream. I probably do need to have the text bigger and just deal with the fact that I lose the real estate. Um, how is that? I wonder. Um, too many mice. Can I zoom in on OBS so I can see the OBS window a little bit better? But not the whole. Not. There we go. That's probably fine. Oh, yeah. Let me know if you're having problems seeing the text on my screen. Okay, so part of me just doesn't want to play with this right now. Part of me wants to look at the thing that I was going to look at. Because now that I've got some form of character sheet going, I need to look at how I'm actually storing the data, and then how I'm moving it between the server and the client. But I feel like flex blocks row wrap, that sounds like something I did. Was it the thing that I did? Let's do this. I've got a full. The trait is display flex. The field set, that's where we are. The minimum width is 33 and the maximum width is 100. Did I come to the bit where I actually want the maximum width to be 33% so that we 30%? Because is it 30%? And then maybe let's go 15 EM again. There we go. Now I've got my columns, and the advantage of it being on the right. Here we go. We do this, and we've got a phone screen, and everything is too small now. 15. Let's go 20 EM. Minimum width of 20 EM. It's still. I think that I need to change how I'm doing the box inside. But I can, responsive. That's not. I can change to different devices and see what they look like. Anyway, that's a whole thing, which I'm not going to do right now. I am going to make that one little change in the code, though. So that is in the character sheet file. So we can see where we're at. We've got a list of attributes and a list of abilities. They're both association lists. And then I've got advantages as well, which I think is actually being printed here, except there's nothing. Yeah, there's nothing in most of it. And then we've got the code that I wrote on stream that prints it all. And then I've got this giant character sheet thing, and I just changed the field set width to 30% and the min width to 20 EM. And so now when I reload it, we'll keep that. Look at, now, yeah, that's right. I found an idea of having different CSS for different devices, which was interesting, but I'll look at all of that later. For the moment, let's think about how we're going to put stuff, move data between the two platforms, between the client and the server. So currently, I'm rendering. I'm producing. Let's jump back in here. All this HTML, not the dice roll, the character sheet. Here it is. I'm producing all of this HTML, and it is then being sent down the pipe to the client. It's not even complete yet because I don't have all of the fields that I want. And eventually I'll have to say, this is set. It'll be, we'll calculate the character has a strength of 3, and so therefore we'll have to add in the appropriate HTML to do that. So that works. I've got sort of two ideas competing in my mind. So the idea, let's run, I'm pretty sure, ink. I do not have Inkscape. Oh, all right. About GIMP. We've got GIMP. I believe that the resolution I'm running this at is 3K. Sorry, I've just flashbanged everyone. Let's do this and not write in white, we'll write in grey. Okay. So we want a client, we've got a web page, run it on a computer. Maybe realistically I'm not going to have it full I will be running it full screen. Yeah, I will be running it full screen. So let's just do that. We want to have a main character sheet for whatever player character. Or maybe, because if I'm running a solo game, maybe I'll have 2 or 3 different main character sheets. But I also, so you've got the idea of the character's character sheet, and then you've got the idea of like NPCs or monsters or whatever. Now, in WOD source books, World of Darkness source books, they tend to just be text instead of have full character sheets. I wonder if I can go vampire NPC stat block. Vampire the Masquerade. The Masquerade. List of stat blocks. List images. I just want. Yeah, see, this is just giving me the sheets from the actual character sheets and images for bloodlines. Looks more like. It looks like any of these blocks of text, right? List of stat blocks. Cookie settings, reject all. Police detective in the core book. What happens if I go here? It's going to give me a page for the core book. This is just telling me that this is where these are. All right. I can't find an example, but they're just text. I've sent the wrong thing to the wrong page. Hang on, let's fix that. 9 3 9 9 3. There we go. So I could just have them on their own as displayed in the same way, just as text. And then so the question then becomes, where should I be building the character sheet? Should I be building it in JavaScript? At which point I've got to write a whole lot of paren script I've got to basically translate the stuff that I wrote in Lisp into paren script. I do have to convert the sheet. So I'm going wherever I originally rendered the character sheet, whether I do it on the client or on the server. Sorry, I've got something in my throat. This is awful. Oh. Whether I do it on the client or the server, I'm going to have to change things. So you change value on the character sheet. I change the strength of my character from 3 to 4. Then I'm going to have to recognize that change in the UI. I'm going to have to send that to the client, to the server. The server has to then process it in its data, and then the server has to send that back to all other clients to go, hey, we recognize that you have made this change, that this change has been made, and everyone needs to update their sheets appropriately. So that only has to be for the attribute, for whatever given attribute is needed. And then it's then it's like, well, am I sending all characters, all data to all clients, or am I just sending the what they've requested? And then I have to keep a list of it on the. Okay, that's an interesting question too. Anyway, what we do know is we have to represent everything that's on a character sheet. So how do we do that? Common Lisp has the first standardized object system. So I think that everyone will talk about, and it's proper object-oriented programming, not object-oriented in the quotes that everyone uses, like in C and Java, C++ and Java. Supposedly, I haven't actually dived deeply enough into it to understand that myself. However, I think that it makes sense to use it here because we do essentially have a character class, a character object that needs to be created. And the difference between a class and a struct, I think that there's a little bit of extra work from memory making a class. However, I think that if you make a struct, Lisp will automatically give you accesses. Whereas with a class, you have to specify how you want to make your accesses and do a few things like that. Like here, we've got you're calling make instance of person, and that just does your thing. In this example, sorry, they've got this person class. You call make instance on the object, make an instance of the object, and then you can set it through the init arg, through whatever its init thing is. You can then access it like this. If you're listening to someone like Casey Muratori, don't ever do accesses in Lisp. In Common Lisp's object system, accesses are good because otherwise you can't access your data. Accesses are the macros that you use in Lisp in order to actually get to the data, as opposed to an extra thing that is wrapping around a thing that you have decided is private. As far as I know, at least, I haven't, through everything I've looked at so far, I've not seen another way of accessing the data if you don't have an accessor. Otherwise, I'd agree with him. If we were writing C, like, why would you ever have an accessor unless you specifically have some logic you need to have to call whenever you do that access. But yeah, here it's just a macro that basically gives you a pointer to the data. And then Lisp is just very verbose, so you've got to actually specify what you want it to be called. Yeah, see here we're saying set f, set field. This is how you set a variable. The variable we want is the accessor for the object. So it's basically the same as using a struct in C, and we're setting that to true. You can do inheritance, defining classes. It's going through and actually explaining what I was just talking about. Creating objects. Again, we're explaining what we were talking about. It's good practice to make a make person thing. So instead of calling make instance, you're calling a function that calls make instance. Slots. Def bar. Yeah. So this is what we were talking about. You can spec the object, and it will give you thing slot value of point. Oh, so maybe everything I was just saying was wrong. You could use the slot value form and type more things. So having an accessor is good because it's a macro that to the slot value. Is that how I'm supposed to understand this? Because it's just type less, and I think that it will do less work. In fact, we can test that. Let's test that right now. Let me make a Scratch file, I think. So we'll go Scratch .lisp, and so we want a class. So def class test. Do I need to? No, it's just empty. It's not like Python where I'm supposed to write object there. And then in class, I just need to have an X, Y, and a Z. X, Y, and a Z. However, I do, because I'm making this test, I want to have an accessor. So this is going to be, hang on, I need another, here we go, X. And then init arg X and accessor X. Is that init arg needs to be like that, and then accessor. And then I'm going to copy this, and we'll make 1, 2 of them. So we've got X, Y, and Z, and we'll just change X to Y. And X to Z. And then that should be... Where are we? Where's the bottom? There's the bottom. We've got a class called test. We can see that there. That's fine. Jump back across, and then we can write def parameter test object is going to be make in. Actually, I will go to the trouble of going def on make test, and we're gonna get X, Y, and Z, X, Y, and Z, and then that's going to call make instance. I don't want to type it of test, and the accessor is X, X, Y, Y, Z, Z, and then that should compile too. And now I can just type make test 1, 2, 3, and now I've got parameter called test object. So I can now call, let's go format t a percent test object. Yes, compilation file. That's finished. That's nice. Here, okay, this one. This one will actually show me the result. So I've got this test thing here. That's nice. Let's have a look at. Make a couple of copies of this. So we've got an object. But instead of the object, let's use the accessor x to test object and see that we've got one. Great. Now the slot thing, where is it? Slots. Inspect. So I can go inspect. Let's just try inspect by itself and see if that works. Inspect. And that will give me all of the slots. And we'll go slot value. We'll try slot value. Whoa, what are we doing? Over here. I think in here, slot value, I think it was test object and then X. Do I need to quote X? I do need to quote X. That makes sense. So now if I run this, I get 1. Interestingly, I don't get 1. I get greater than 1, so it's like a prompt. Oh no, it is just giving me 1. I don't know where the greater than sign, the angle bracket came from. Interesting. So what we can do, I should be able to disassemble. So slime disassemble disassemble symbol. Is that what I'm doing? No, that breaks. It's abort. Let's try disassemble. Definition? Not in a definition. Let's try it in make instance. Slime. Disassemble. Here we go. So that was slime disassemble symbol. So CCMD. I can use that. And over here, what's this? It's the actual x86 assembly code. Now, I probably should try and stop going, try not to go on a rant, but Lisp has a reputation of being slow because Lisp is an interpreter. It's an interpreted language. So why do I have x86 assembly code? It's all a bit old, that reputation, I think. Lisp was a purely interpreted language, and it technically is an interpreted language. In fact, I recommend that everyone go out there and write a Lisp language. It's one of those projects that is like writing a text editor or something, that is a really good programming exercise that will teach you a lot about programming. I did it way back when I was studying. I found myself bored between classes, sat in the library. I had what it was, 6 hour wait between two classes. When I had a 6 p.m. class in the evenings and a 9 a.m. class that finished at 12. So in that 6 hour wait, I would sit around in the library and read books or do work or whatever. Um, and I would be reading books off the shelf. So one of the things that I read, I would go through their computing section, and they had all of these old books from the late 80s, early 90s. And they were the best books I've ever read on computing. Um, People recommend, you see all these books on computing that people that come out and just like, what is all this crap? Read those old books because that stuff hasn't changed. All of those fundamental things that it's in them, it hasn't changed. I mean, sure, there are gonna be some good books that you should read that probably I should read too, if I'm honest. Anyway, one of them had this was the one where uh this book had Alan Alan Kay. Is that his name? The guy that invented or coined the term object oriented programming and described it originally. That had that book had that essay in it, and it wasn't called object oriented programming. He coined the term, I think. Whether or not he did it I think he did it in that essay, but it was a book on data structures and structured programming. Um, and that was how he was sort of talking about it. Anyway, one of the exercises in this book was this is how a Lisp interpreter works. Write it, and basically you wrote a Lisp one interpreter, so a scheme interpreter, in C. It was a really good. It sort of explained how it worked and the things that you did and you needed to do, and then you did it, and then it had an thing that you could check what you'd done against. Really good exercise. So I did that. Anyway, bit of a rant. That rant aside, Lisp has evolved a lot since the 70s or the 80s or whenever. I think from the 90s it evolved. If I remember things that I've read, these days Lisp, at least common Lisp interpreters, often SBCL being the one that I'm using, compile down to machine code. And so when I'm running the Lisp code that I'm writing, it's not just interpreting it. I don't think it's even JIT compiled. I think it's just, okay, compile this into x86 assembly, put that in the machine, and then so it's still a virtual machine, but it is just x86 assembly code. So we could look at this and go, hey, look, this is what it is. And this is, I'm guessing, what it needs to do to create the object. And we don't really care. We don't really care about that. What we want to test is how accesses work. So it was ccmd disassemble. No, I need to put it in a function. By the look of it, so that I basically need to give it some kind of bounds of this is the block that I want disassembled. So let's put defun access x, and do this. In fact, we won't even do the format. We're just going to do I'm going to do this. I'm going to call access x in this block here. However, we'll paste this here, and I just need to bring that back to here, and then I can compile that And if we jump back to the REPL, if I run that, that should, yeah, processing it. It's just going to print 1. But that means that I should be able to ccmd, okay, access x, and look at that. There's the disassembly for the access x function. So if we do the same thing for slot value, so defun slot x, and we'll go there we go. So we've now got this thing here, and let's see if I can bring them up side by side. ccmd slot x. So that's changed it, and there's a whole extra line in that. But where are we? We're here. Slime description. Oh, hang on. Is slime description the... Okay. So what I will do, I'll copy this into the scratch buffer. So the scratch buffer is Emacs's is a buffer that's always available in Emacs for you to just write Lisp or whatever you want. Let's just get rid of this. Now, if I jump back to my code and we CMD that, then I've got access X on the right, and I can jump back to Scratch, and we can see that I've got the disassembly for each on each side. So we can see that we first mov RAX, then we're moving something else into RX. We're moving something RAX into R1316, moving RBP8 into RAX, move RSI into here. Now I'm test object. So this is getting the object. So RSI now contains what's it called? The object that's the location of the object that we're acting on. We're moving RSI into EDX. RSI 11 into EDX, whatever that is. Moving RDX plus R13 into RDX. Like this is the same code. I am not particularly au fait with assembly. I need to start looking at assembly and reading it and learning it. I know that we are essentially, there's some kind of comparison here. Everything is the same, except that, in fact, I think that the extra line is that the slot is producing a longer comment because the accessor knows that I'm just accessing the variable x, whereas this is going, well, we're calling this, this is the form that we're calling in order to get x. Yeah, int3, byte. So that is literally the same code. There you go. So calling accessor is just a macro to the slot. I think. I think that that's what that. It produces the same underlying assembly. Anyway, interesting little thing. This has wasted my time though. However, what I think we can say is we will move forward with classes. So I will write a character class that contains all of the information that we need. And then I'm going to have to do something similar on the client side. Write a JavaScript class or something, or just store it in an object and not actually define a class. Whatever I choose to do there, I can then write some WebSocket functionality to send an entire class from the server to the client, and then probably to sync backwards as well, so from the client to the server. And then we can write like a parameter update, a class update one as well, which is just in this class, we will update this trait to this value. And then that will make up all of the WebSocket logic, and then it's just a matter of doing all of the interface stuff. Everything else is just a matter of how are we doing the manipulation? How is the user doing the manipulation? So yeah, a bit of a shorter stream today, but that's been pretty interesting. I will, before I do anything else, let's actually start this. I will go into character sheet and we will write def class. There's also a question. How am I going to store data? I can just persist. One of the interesting things about Lisp being a virtual machine is that the standard sort of way to deploy a common Lisp or something else application is to save the state of the virtual machine. So I can just save the current state of the virtual machine in memory and then load that when I want to, continue running with it, at which point I can actually just keep everything in memory and I don't actually need to do any kind of writing to disk. I don't need a database. But is that actually how I want to write the application? Is that actually what I want to do? Obviously, if I was writing something that wasn't just meant for personal use, that would be a bad idea. If I, generating user data and stuff, there's no way you'd be able to keep everything in memory. I, for my personal usage of this, I will be able to keep everything in memory, most likely. But maybe I should implement a database anyway. That just might be a good idea. Something else to think about. Anyway, we will have a character. And it's going to have a whole lot of things. It's going to have how do I put attributes and stuff in? So it's going to have a name. You're going to have a player. You're going to have a nature, a demeanor. Ooh, I don't necessarily want to play specific splats, but what if I do? What if I decide, because I'm initially thinking I want to play sort of generic stuff and not actually play vampire or mage or something like that. But what if I do want to play? I want to play mage, and this week I want to play wraith. They have different versions of the character. I mean, sure, there's inheritance, whatever. So how do I do that? Do I have different objects for the different types that I have to implement every time, or should this just be generic lists? Like, if I just go attributes and then it's just a list, because I think it's like attributes, and can I give it a type maybe? Can I find the word type? The macro for defining new data types is that's a type, sure. I feel like you should be able to enforce a type. Because that's the other thing. I could just completely forgo a class and define a type of array, right? And just put everything in actual data. And the C programmer in me wants to do that. Common list object system slot type. That's the cookbook, which is what I've got here, right? Mop concepts. I'm not sure what we're talking about here. Northwestern EDU. Really, I should be looking at the hyperspec, and that will just tell me what it can go on a slot. Site is not available. That's nice. Constructor of OOP. That's not Lisp. With slots. Demystifying Lisp slot access. Macros versus mop for dynamic iteration. Let's break down this powerful Lisp technique. In common Lisp, classes define objects, and slots are like the fields or attributes that hold data within those objects. When you want to perform an action on each slot of an object, like printing its value, checking its type, or modifying it, you often need a way to loop or iterate through them. While Lisp provides powerful introspection capabilities, the ability for a program to examine its own structure, directly iterating over the slots in a generic way within a method can be a bit tricky because the slot names are usually fixed at compile time. This is where macros come in handy. Macros in Lisp are incredibly powerful because they allow you to write code that writes code. The code transformation happens at compile time, meaning the macro expands into regular Lisp code before your program actually runs. This is crucial for tasks like iterating over slots, where you want to generate specific code for each slot. Your provided code snippet with slot suggests you're trying to generate with slots forms dynamically for each slot. The with slots macro is great for accessing multiple slots by name. But if you don't know the slot names ahead of time, you have many of them, hard coding them becomes cumbersome. A macro can inspect the class definition at compile time to find out all of the slot names. Then it can generate code that looks like this: with slots data object, with slots other object, or even let slots value, yeah, okay. So it's saying that if you call inspect, it will return the names of your slots. You can then get the names of the slots and turn those into a list that you can iterate over. Okay. Cool. What was I looking for? I was looking to see if I could specify a type. So I class of brief guide to C loss. Yes, class of A, defining classes, accessor init form, int arg. I can use init form. Oh, init form is giving you the default, I think. Perhaps I can't. I'm sure I can. I just need to find. Perhaps I can't though. Who knows? Accessor init arg init form. Init form actually no, init form is the default. A subclass can change the default value in default initial value. So it's initial as in init as in initial, as opposed to init as in initialize. Because I read that as initialize form. Oh, here's the form that we want to call in order to generate. Maybe that could be a lambda though. But that then you'd be overriding it, right? As opposed to, I guess this is why you need a setter. Maybe I need to write a setter that will very specifically make sure that it is only creating an integer. Here we go. For multiple methods, determine which method is more. Hang on. What are we reading about? Generic functions and methods. So I can send instance operation name arg, or I can write operation name instance arg. Yeah, I can def method, which creates a function that specifically is for that form, is for the class. So def generic can be used to define a generic function. You don't have to call def generic, however, because def method actually defines the generic function if it has not been defined already. On the other hand, it's often a good idea to use def generic as a declaration that an operation exists, has certain parameters. Okay, yeah, sure. You can call to claim and things like that. Anyway, all of the interesting things happen in methods. Def method, generic function. This may look, but it's basically defun. The lambda list is just what is the thing that the function is actually doing. All of the forms that the function calls, plus things like optional and rest. Oh, okay, optional and rest go into the lambda list. That's interesting. It's because of such things we say a lambda list instead of parameter when describing cool. So a normal function has a lambda list like var1, var2. A method one has one which each parameter can be specialized into a particular class. So var1 class 1, var2 class 2. The specializer is optional, meaning omitting it means that the method can apply to instances of any class. Okay. So def method change subject, teach teacher, new subject. But one that can be here's the new the new subject here can be any object. Right. So I can have a setter. I could write. I don't want to write setters. I guess I'm writing the code. I'm going to be able to. I do. I even have to declare that it is a list. Always going to be a list, or whatever data type. I might use arrays. Def method test number integer. Interesting. Anyway, I've just I said 15 minutes ago that I was going to call it there, and then we've kept going. So we can go attributes are a list, or some other sequence. Instead of having, yeah, and that way, if I ever decide that instead of wanting to play with these attributes, pre V5 or Chronicles of Darkness, World of Darkness ones, I can go, I'm playing Chronicles of Darkness instead, and just declare the particular attributes that need to be updated instead. So, yeah, brilliant. Thanks very much. I think I'm calling it here. We're actually calling it. Thanks for watching if you've watched. Because of the way I've set up things, I can't actually see. I've just got the chat up just as chat. It doesn't tell me how many people are watching the streams, if anyone is watching the streams. And having shrunk my windows, it's telling me, is that telling me I've got 10 followers or I've got 10 watches? And then again, if I look at Twitch, does it tell me one viewer? I've got a couple of viewers. Cool. Well, thank you very much for watching. I hope you've enjoyed. If you've watched on YouTube, I suppose I'm supposed to tell you to subscribe and leave a comment, or all of that stuff. Hit the like button. And yeah, I will see you next time. Have a good one.